harm, one of the reasons it causes harm is because do people know when something's not working for them? Like if your staff said, oh, thank you so much for that new system, it's terrible. Or if the community members inside of Portland say, thank you so much for the opportunity to apply, this policy looks great, except I can't access it. Like people know when something's not working. We don't know why it's not working necessarily, but we do know that we often don't share data, but people know anyway. And the other reason is, what do we lose when we don't share? When something doesn't work and we pretend it worked, what do we lose?
Credibility.
Absolutely, and trust. So again, we want to make sure that the community knows, whatever community we're talking about, whether it's internal community here with the city or external, that we share data.
Get the answer to the next one.
The fifth one, and this one is near and dear to my heart. We also, commissioners and mayor, I don't know if you often hear the term continuous quality improvement, but it basically means we use data in real time. And why might we do that instead of waiting till something's over?
So you can make corrections?
Yeah, so you can make
Oh,
corrections.
sorry, I jumped in. The mayor was going to answer.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mayor, please. What were you going to say?
So that you can make changes. Evolves with the changing need, or if you see you need a course correction,
That's right.
you have the opportunity to make it.
Well done.
Well done.
Yeah,
Well
yeah,
done,
yeah.
commissioners and mayor. There's another reason that we want to do this too. And this is something when we talk about course corrections, we think sometimes that not making a course correction might just mean something's ineffective, right? So we try something, we try it, I'm coming towards you, don't worry, Markeisha. But we get to Markeisha and it hasn't worked. Oh no, okay, we might have lost some resources and this is taxpayer dollars, we don't want to waste resources. But the other reason to use data in real time, and I don't mean 100 more data points because nobody has time for that. I've heard you, Mayor. You all don't have time for that, and I know your staff don't have, and department heads don't have time for that. It's a couple data points, but the reason we need to do it is when it comes to racial equity, we're talking about people's lives. So making a mistake or not doing something you said you're going to do or testing something out without course correcting causes harm. At the least harm it causes might be trust, and you know that the community trust is critical. But it also causes harm because whatever is not getting done, that opportunity that's not happening, the training that's not happening to make staff more culturally competent, whatever you are intended with that action, if you are now not delivering on it, it is causing harm because whatever that is needed. We're a city. We're not doing luxury items. Y'all aren't producing iPhones, which some people might say is not a luxury item, but that's neither here nor there because we work in some high income places.
I suggest another thing related to
Yes,
that, and
sir.
it gets back to the other ones. If you don't have the data on a consistent basis, then you're actually missing out on the community input.
That's right.
You're missing out on the community input that might
right.
actually offer you suggestions or
That's
course
right.
corrections or ideas on where things can be improved. If things become stagnant.
That's right. Not only stagnant, but actually unresponsive, right? So again, we want to get out of this notion that there is like the base and then we move from there, that if we are not moving, we are actually doing harm. I know it's a hard thing to imagine, but that if the community is not engaged, that whatever we're coming up with is not as good as if the community was engaged. And because of that, we are misusing resources. The community actually needs to be engaged. But even if it's not a community project, let's say it's a departmental head process, if the department heads aren't a part of the process and you're getting data in real time, you could be causing actual harm. Yes, Commissioner,
I have one to add.
please.
So if we're going to stick with the metaphor of the moving train, then we have to recognize that the situation on the ground is dynamic and our approaches need to be
Love it.
dynamic. I mean, we've made, the mayor's office and my office wrote a renewables resolution that was one of the most aggressive in the whole country 2 years ago. And sorry, Mayor, I think it's already out of date because
Right.
we have new data.
Right.
That's
right. That's right. And it doesn't mean that the impact we want to see changes. It doesn't
Right.
mean that collectively the commissioners and the mayor plus all of the department heads can't come up with a central set of impact measures that you come together around. But to your point, Commissioner, how we get there is a constant moving
And it
target.
doesn't mean that you have to have perfect data. Because oftentimes when we work with elected officials, like, well, Theo, that sounds all great, but we don't have the data.
Right.
We don't have it now. We can't disaggregate by this. We don't know about our East Asian pop. And so we will get to the tool in a way that you don't have to have the perfect data in order to be able to do that continuous
We
improvement.
never do.
Never.
Exactly.
That's right, Commissioner.
Well, and isn't that an excuse a lot of times
Yes.
for non-movement?
That's right.
We don't know enough about it yet. Let's
That's
put
right.
a study group together.
That's right.
That's
That's right,
right.
Commissioner. Okay, just 2 more principles, and then I promise we'll get to the tool.
All right.
The 6th one, and commissioners and mayor, this is probably the most important thing that we want you to focus on today, is that we use root cause analysis to define what solutions we're going to use. So, what this means is, let's say we know that there is a racial inequity in our community. So if you all don't mind, just something that you know is true for communities of color, particular community of color. If you don't mind giving us an example, let's try to stick something that we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, one disparity.
Houselessness.
What is it?
Houselessness.
Houselessness. Okay. So when it comes to folks of color, is there a gap? So is it disproportionately true? So there's proportionately more people of color who have houselessness than they exist in the community, right? So maybe double. Is it double houselessness? Something like that?
It's more than that.
More than
for
that.
some
It's probably
communities.
triple that
Okay.
Yeah.
because I think it's a direct relationship to the police conversation, right? If
Okay.
people get arrested, chances are then they have a harder time getting an apartment, which means that they have this record that's following them and
Got
just
it.
exacerbates.
Great. I mean, not great.
No, yeah,
But thank you
Okay,
for that
yeah.
data point.
Okay. I got you.
Oh,
Good.
thank you.
I got you.
We do the same thing.
Double.
So here's the thing we usually do, and I don't know who your favorites are, but we usually go to this shelf of best practices. It could be as big as the chamber here. And we say, okay, what are they doing in Denver? What are they doing in Seattle? What are they doing in San Francisco? And what are they doing in Boston? And we say, what are they doing about houselessness in other places? And we say, evidence says this works, and we've tried this in the past, and it kind of works, so we should try that. We come up with a solution, and we think, maybe this time it'll work, and we go like this, and maybe we do something just more of it. We built housing, it was affordable housing, let's just build 20 times more. I was actually an assistant commissioner in the New York City Department of Homeless Services, and I had 60,000 homeless people in our system. So believe me, I get it.
I picked the right topic then, didn't I?
Yes, you did. But actually, houselessness and displacement, these things are interconnected when racial equity comes into play. Is that right?
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Fritz. Okay, so instead of that beautiful chamber of library, what we do is we ask the question, why? Why is it that there's triple the rate of homelessness for people of color than for others? I mean, at least not for others, based on their proportionate numbers in the community. Why? And if we don't ask why first, we will actually come up with a solution that is relatively baked and also may or may not have anything to do with why it exists here in Portland. So if you don't mind, commissioners, and we'll do this in just a couple of minutes, but just name some reasons why people of color in Portland have homelessness at triple the rate than than their numbers are.
They are disproportionately represented in low-income communities. They are discriminated against in housing.
Hold on one second. Discrimination,
They've been denied educational equity.
education.
I'm
Redlining.
sorry.
A couple more.
Redlining.
Joanne, you
What
want
was
to
it?
jump in?
History of redlining. Good. Okay, and so we'll go into this a little bit more.
Yeah.
But so if what we did was we build more housing,
Yeah.
and we would go down
Or
actually.
give people vouchers.
Give vouchers. That's
Yeah,
right.
That'll solve it.
First of all, actually, before we do that, so why are people of color in Portland more discriminated against than other folks when it comes to, yes?
Because when Oregon became a state, it first order of business was to pass a law that prohibited black folks from living here.
And why was that? Why did that happen?
Because it was created as a white homeland, and that's the way they wanted it to be.
White utopia, I think, is
Okay.
the,
And why else? So we have that history in Oregon, and truth be known, whether it happened explicitly or implicitly in other places, there were things put on the books to explicitly do things like that. So we have that history. Why else is discrimination happening now?
Are we allowed to just say racism?
Sure. So that's down here.
No, you
But-
can't say that.
So, how did, Commissioner
right to
Fritz, but down here is racism. It's gonna. We're talking about folks of color. There's lots of roots in racism.
Right.
Help me get from there is the experience of discrimination. Discrimination is real for folks of color, and it's rooted in racism. But what's happening between racism and discrimination and racism? Are there actors playing a role? Are landlords doing something? What's happening?
well, I have to go back one, which is
Sure.
people of color are overrepresented in our prison population, or
Coming over here,
due to racist
top level.
laws, especially around drug laws. And then we have the media
Giving me up here, but help me over here, Commissioner.
I think I'm getting to it. So the media has created a completely
portrayal.
skewed impression in the public of crime and who is doing crime.
And why does the media in Portland do that?
Well, I'm talking about the media in general, but
Okay,
the
in
media in
general.
Portland,
Yeah, why would the media in Portland do that?
well,
Because nationally, media's been consolidated, so they only
Okay.
print and report on press release. And who has staff that send press releases to the media all day? Police.
Okay. And why else? So the media wants to.
disrespect.
Why else does the media
I
portray
mean,
folks of
human
color?
beings have a negativity bias.
Okay.
And I think, what is the,
If it leads, it bleeds.
thank
If
you.
it bleeds, it
Oh,
bleeds.
yes,
Good.
mind
So-
meld there.
So they want to sell papers.
They want to
Okay.
sell papers.
Not that there's papers anymore, but.
Clickbait.
Okay.
You know, I'm going to venture to guess that most of our journalists in Portland are white, so they've got their own implicit bias.
Good. And why are most journalists in Portland white?
Because most of the people who own the stations are white.
So the people white people hire other white people.
They hire people
Why
that
do
they're-
white people hire
they
other
hire
white people?
they're comfortable with.
Because
That-
that's who they went to college with.
Comfort.
That's who they grew up
Good.
next door to.
Networks.
That's-
Okay, so I'm going
yeah.
to stop us here just for 1 second because we're going to practice more when it comes
Well
to.
done.
Yeah.
They're warm.
Okay, let's
Well
keep going
done.
then. All right. All right. So here's the thing. We would do this for all of these high level. Why are folks of color more low income? And these things overlap. We're not trying to make it to sound like everything is clean and siloed. But we would come up with a list of whys up here for Portland specifically. And to your point, some of it is national in scope. And we would dig down. And Commissioner Fritz, is that, yes? Okay. Commissioner Fritz says, well, can't we just say racism? No. We can't just say racism. We actually have to go down a ladder. Because at each level is a potential location for an intervention that's related to the root cause. Now, this seems pretty big and macro when it comes to all of Portland. You all are at that level, commissioners and mayors. So the cool thing is we're with the right people for population level change. Your departments have actually just gone through a process, and we'll talk about it in a couple minutes, where they have defined all kinds of things at a very macro level, and we have the opportunity to actually put all of that together and say, what does it look like, not just for each department. We're going to talk about it in a couple minutes, but the key to this exercise is this. If we said, let's just say white folks hire other white folks because it's comfortable for them, or it's who they went to college with, it's just, this is something we know, we could actually change something about that. We may not be able to go and say, big media outlets like you now need to redirect your stories, but we may be able to say, what's the stories that we want to come into our situations, into our environment? What are the things that we want to be highlighting? But we can also do something about white networks. We can, because that's just something that we know we have more relationship to when it comes to our individual relationships to who we purchase from, who we hire, all kinds of things. So we can do a root cause analysis, and you're saying, how is that going to change the rate of houselessness for POC? Well, it's not just one action. We're not going to pick one thing down here. We're going to figure out where are those key components, and what you will notice in root cause analysis, like a node will begin to start, where a lot of things start to converge, and that's a place where we could really make a big difference, and we're going to practice it. Yes, Commissioner?
So I wanted to go back to Commissioner Fritz's question about racism.
Yes.
I think the reason that you don't want to start there is because people close off as soon as you mention racism, right?
a fair point.
It's a kind of get out of jail free card. Oh, I'm not racist. I don't actually have to listen to this stuff, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
No, the reason I asked the question is also because that's a pretty broad term, and I appreciate you making us go through what are the steps to break that down, because it's also, just as a shutting off question, it's it's racism, so
Done.
good, we've got it finished.
Right.
It's like ending world hunger, right?
Yeah.
Could we take a moment to elaborate on the white utopia a little bit?
Sure. tell
Because
us.
it's something I think about in regards to disability as well as racism. Because the Black community or the visibly disabled community are relatively small compared to the dominant culture, and because those communities, well, the Black community has been very, very, very segregated, and the disability community is also hidden for other reasons. I don't feel like the average Portlander has really had the opportunity to learn how to live side by side with other cultures or with people experiencing differences. It gives them the sense that whiteness is the norm, is the standard, and being Black or being disabled is a deviation. And media bias, absolutely, we've got cultural and class differences as well, and then the media bias, so it's all kind of feeds into each other.
And to your point, Commissioner, what I'll say is, when we talk about segregation, you would say, discrimination? Why is there discrimination? Well, actually, what we know is that white Portlanders don't often interact with Portlanders of color, and I heard you say because of racial, residential segregation, but also because of numbers. Why is that? And then you say, well, so how does that impact folks of color? And then you say, well, there's this idea of white utopia, right? And so we keep going down. We don't just sort of say stuff, because if we don't have a relationship that gets under and under and under and under till we get to racism or ableism or whatever it is. We talk about race. We center race. We believe it's a way that we can stop the displacement of what's happening, but we know there's intersectional views on this. But again, we want to go dig down in a very rigorous and disciplined way rather than just sort of spectrum. So I really appreciate that example.
And importantly, there's not just one route. So you two commissioners may go in on the utopia, you may have solidarity in that, but it gets dicey when we do this, and some folks may have an aversion to that, but we just took one. And so there will be other routes that other folks will be able to see themselves even more powerfully in, because you can see it's not just one route that's at the why of this.
And sometimes a route is technical. That's the way we've designed the law. That's the way we've created the legislation. Why? We don't actually know why we did it that way, it just is. So if we know it's actually a technical thing, sometimes it's a little simple thing we can do as commissioners and mayor. And then other times it's something like, white utopian, like this, and that is a culture thing. That is something that deeply lives in our bodies and in our experiences, and that takes longer. And there's no doubt that the commissioners and the mayor can't do it alone. There's no doubt about that, but you have a role to play. That's the key about this kind of analysis. So we're going to talk about our final point, which is number 7, very quickly, but very importantly. And I will just raise up the brilliance of your departments and their staff for really being able to embody this, which is that we cannot talk about data in a really serious way without building trust and relationship. Because anytime we use data that's not built around trust and relationship, and it looks bad, it becomes this moment where we really want to hide from it, or we want to dismiss it, or we want to get away from it. But actually, when we build trust, we can embrace those negative or scary data points and actually do what we just did. Say, it's only 20%. We wanted it to be an 80%, and it's only 20. Why? And we dig down under it and then solve for it. Our communities have not been a part of the conversation, and so when data comes at them, it comes at them, and it actually looks like we are blaming you for the problem. Same could happen with our departments. Same could happen with the community-based organizations we work with. And so the key is, what's the relationship we build that's focused on impact, not focused on whether I like you.
Yeah.
We don't have to have happy hour. We don't have to come to your daughter's graduation. No. We have a relationship around impact and a commitment to it in such a way that we are willing to work together to actually make sure that that impact stays center. So relationship.
And what do you do if you can't have that?
What if you can't?
Yes, if there's an entity that perceives its job to be just telling us what we've done wrong and blaming us for the data.
The way we see the answer to that is that we start with who we do have. We actually begin with a little bit of a choir as a core group, and then we identify the partners we need, and that's actually step number 5 of the methodology, that have a role to play, even if we can't have them right away. Even if there's somebody that we can't stand. I've been in places where there's either the corporate sector or a particular nonprofit or a part of government where they feel like they are such naysayers, but without them, they are stuck. Mm-hmm. And so step 5 of the process says, who are the partners with the role to play? And we create strategies, sub-strategies to get those people to come to the table. It might mean that Commissioner has a relationship through your uncle in DC, or it might be that we just have to slowly over the next 2 years begin to have a conversation. And sometimes they're not going to be aligned with our ethics, and yet we need them to contribute to the impact in a particular way. So sometimes we give up on the ethic part, and we just say, can you do this thing? And over time, what we've seen is people do come to the table. And we have lots of examples, and we can share them with you about especially private sector and government partners who have been slowly able to join more as partners. But in the beginning, you start with kind of the core.
Thank you.
Because if you start a process where this is not at the core, you'll go nowhere. You'll go nowhere.
So commissioners and mayor, are you ready for the actual methodology now? That was just talking about the methodology.
Let us have it.
Mayor, are you ready for it? Is it okay? Can we go
Ready
there?
to go. I'm good.
Crowd, can we talk about the methodology now? Are we good? Yes, thank you.
Okay, you warmed us up.
All right. Because again, we didn't want to use a tool, crash through these windows, and do some harm. We want to use the tool responsibly. Those are the principles for it. Okay. So a slide that says key ideas. The first key idea, do you want to do the first one?
I mean, it relates to the principle. This is about decision making. This is not about reporting. This is not about compliance. This is about using the data that shows up through the tool to make better decisions.
That's right. And also, just so you know, Mark Friedman created results-based accountability about 25 years ago. It didn't have a racial equity lens. So we've been doing work now for 10, 12 years now to embed it and use it. So now it's really good. But before, it was just RBA. So if you look it up, it doesn't have racial equity in it. So again, for decision making. Second, it's an ends to means process. Is there any reason why I can't walk throughout the room
Nope.
in here for any security reasons? Okay. I'm from New York City, so we take these things very seriously. Okay, so if over here we say we want all Portlanders, is that the right word? Okay, yeah, okay. Portlanders to be, oh, hi. We want all Portlanders to be healthy. Does anybody think that's a bad idea? We want all Portlanders to be healthy.
Nope.
What we usually do is we go to our shelf of health strategies, and we say which one will make Portlanders healthy, and we say what's an example of a health strategy we might employ?
Immunizations. For every
Immunizations,
child.
good. Every child gets an immunization, and now every Portlander is healthy.
Soda tax.
What is it?
Soda tax. Good.
Soda tax is another one. We also hear things like farmers markets. Now, is there anything wrong with immunizations? So, well, I'm not going to get into the tax question. Farmers markets. We think these things are good. There's
Right.
no reason why these don't necessarily improve health.
Right.
But what we don't do is a process that moves from my friends here in the back over here by Claire and slowly works our way to the right set of solutions that address our problem. We don't know why it is the way it is. We with our urgency and our commitment to the population our community, our taxpayers, let's try this. Let's try this. And then in England or in LA, they're doing this thing. Finland is a big one for education. Do it. And so this process is an ends to means process that by the time we come over to you, commissioners and mayor, we actually have a sense of why it is the way it is. We have community buy-in, and now we have a set of solutions that have a chance. And sometimes we can't do them by ourselves. Sometimes we need partnerships, and so that's included in the process. The second point we want you to know about is that RBA distinguishes between everybody, making a difference for everybody, all people in Portland are healthy, and the work that happens inside of the Department of Public Health, or a project level. So we call that population level, that's everybody in Portland, or performance level, something that's happening in emergency services, or the whole, anything that has a formal name is at the performance level. We don't want to confuse that. It's not fair to you all to say we believe that, for your departments especially, we want everybody in Portland to have a good education. And yet, is it just the Department of Education's challenge?
No.
Who else plays a role besides Department of Education to make sure everybody's well educated in Portland?
Transportation.
Transportation, who else?
Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec? People that are not part of government. Help me think outside the box, outside of government.
After school programs,
After school programs, who else?
babysitters.
Babysitters,
Parents.
parents,
Families.
coaches,
Mentors.
people that provide food in the community. Could
Faith
be the
community.
right? And so what we do is we often say, the city government is failing because education is failing, and we have a role to play in government, but actually this process allows us to see what's our slice of the pie, and then what's your slice of the pie. Let's come together, and we're gonna come together on our slice of the pie. We're gonna be clear about it, but it's not the same as population level change. We don't promise population level change by ourselves. We can't. We just said all those other groups are involved, so we have to partner. So it's different. Performance level says, okay, Commissioner, you have these 4 departments that are, how many does everybody have? Departments?
It varies. I have
It
two.
varies.
Okay, 2, 5, 3, whatever it is. Okay, here are your departments, and in each department, here are the performance that they are each responsible for that all contribute to education. Great, now we know, at least I know what my slice of the pie is, and so it distinguishes between those things. Population is everybody, needs a lot of partners. Performance is my slice of the pie. And commissioners and mayor, if people work together, we have to believe that the sum of the parts is greater than the separate pieces. If, who's in the house? We have, Mike, what department are you with? And somebody else, another department, over here. Yeah. If environmental services and Parks and Rec actually work together, it's not that 1 + 1 = 2. It's that 1 + 1 actually equals 3, or sometimes 5, if they do it well. So we have to believe that, and that's part of performance measure, and that's part of results-based accountability. We have to believe in partnerships. So if you don't believe that, if you think y'all can do it alone, I know you don't think you can do it alone. I'm pretty sure, because I see the kind of work that you do, but it's part of the process.
And it takes time. One of the greatest books on the civil rights movement is that it's called Freedom is an Endless Meeting. And so to your point about trust, this is a dynamic process. It takes time. It takes a lot of time with those partnerships.
Now here's where we're going to get more technical. Coming back over here, friends. Remind me of your name? Andres. Okay, over here by Andres is step 1. And we work backwards. Nobody trip me, please. There's 7 steps finally until we get to the solution. There's 7 steps. So your departments are actually at about, they're actually at the end of the first 7 steps. And they're now moving into performance, okay? And we're about to go share those tomorrow for 2 days. We're working all together to look at what's their population level 7 steps. They've already built them all out, compare them, say where are the commonalities, and then dig into their real work, okay? That's what we're about to do. 7 steps, but there's 3 primary questions. And again, if you don't remember anything besides root cause analysis, which we just did, we hope you'll remember the next thing. I love this part. I'm just going to breathe for a second.
Favorite.
This is the first question you'll see at the top of the page, on the second page. Next page. No, you're at it right, Commissioner Fritz. Yeah, that one right there, right here. This one right here. No, yeah, not the picture, right here. That
this one.
Yep. The first question asks us to be clear about how much stuff we do. How many dollars we spend, how many people we serve, how many units we build, how many people we hire. It's a quantity, okay? We're used to this. We count all the time. It's generally how we get funded from the state. It's generally how we ask people, you said you were gonna do 100 of something? You did 100 of something. Here's your money, right? We're used to those numbers. The second question is about how well we do our job. And the key is oftentimes there's a model we're following or a set of something that we know means it's high quality. It could be like the budget got completed in a timely fashion. We said it would be done by, when does the budget have to be done by? The date?
Next week.
June 18th.
June 18th, and by God, we got it done by June 18th. That's a quality measure.
It's a day
Says-
early.
If you do it early, that's even greater. I mean, it tells you maybe it's even higher quality. But commissioners and mayor, the thing that we're really getting clear about in the departments is that, in fact, it does not matter how much stuff we do. Maybe politically it matters. I understand that. And it also doesn't matter, unfortunately, how well we do it unless we know if it made a difference. If it made a difference, especially in the lives of people of color. And so the key for us is to stop measuring success based on quantity and to begin measuring success on whether or not people are better off as a result. And sometimes we get tripped up because of the political expedience and the urgency of our work, and we believe in it so deeply, we want to be responsive, but we're only counting how much we do and how well we do it. And so it's difficult because often that requires time. It requires asking people, hey, Commissioner, if I did a good job, how would I know it? And you're the client, right? Right now, you all are my client. Therefore, you would have to tell me what it means if I did a good job. The client, the community tells you, this is what impact would look like, or your staff would. But again, it doesn't matter how much we do, and it doesn't matter how well we do it if it doesn't make a difference in the lives of people or departments or staff. It does, and it's a very hard
Particularly
transition.
people of color.
That's right.
Right? And so if you think about the route where you all went, and amazing city, Portland. Amazing city, San Francisco. Highest performing school district in the country. Beautiful, glorious city. But if you ask Portlanders of color, is anyone better off? as a result of the budget? Is anyone better off as a result of the partnership? That's the uncomfortable space that we sit in with results-based accountability with the racial equity lens. And you have to sit there if you're actually serious about that data point.
right.
Is anyone better off? Because you can, smart enough to talk yourself into how much, it's a $5 billion budget, it's early, it's on time, deficits, all these different things.
We
But
asked 100 people.
We asked 100 people, we did community meetings, we did that, just like the mayor said, but what he's getting blown up on his phone is different than what people are saying in the chambers. And so like, who actually is better off as a result of it?
And who do you listen to answer that question?
That's right.
Yep, and we'll get there. We're going to practice that a little bit on performance measures. It's a
Okay.
great
It's a
question.
really good question. I'm going to write that question down.
Because oftentimes the loudest voice in the room, the gatekeepers,
Yes.
you know, the folks who have access to the community are the ones who get what they want.
The
And
entitled
that's not what we're talking
Yes.
Yeah, when I was a assistant commissioner in homeless services in New York City, we got a lot of complaints that called in about homeless folks on the street. But actually, the majority of our homeless families, there were 45,000 out of the 60,000, were women and children of color who were in unstable housing throughout the city. And those weren't the ones we were getting calls about. It was actually people like, this looks bad on our city, and this is a business, and I don't want these people outside front. Or it could be just people that had to walk and pass folks. So again, it's not that those things don't both matter.
Right, it's a data point.
It's a data point. It just is it's truly a data point, and we have to say to ourselves, is anyone better off as a result of this thing, and who? Right? And we ask a bunch of people, how would I know you're better off? How would I know you're better off? How would I know you're better off? But at the end of the day, I'll give you one more example. If we are doing a hiring practice, and I don't know about you all, but I know that every institution I know of does not sufficiently have folks of color in leadership roles. It's just the case all over the country in a proportionate number. If we know that to be true, and we just hire a bunch of folks, oh boy, look, we did it. We hired 100 people of color. Well, if you ask folks of color, how would we know we're better off at your job? They might say, yes, of course, I got a job, and I'm in a managerial position. But they might also say, when I'm at my job, I feel respected. They might also say, I want to stay. And that you might actually look at retention rates as well. So again, we just have to get real clear that the people who know the most about the problem and know most about the solution and what impact looks like are the people we're actually serving. White folks in New York City, we have much higher income than folks of color in New York City on average. What better off looks like for me, a homeowner in Midtown Manhattan, is very different from what better off is going to look like for a person of color who is experiencing the damaging effects of poor schooling in the South Bronx. Doesn't mean that person doesn't want a stable home life. It just means what I'm focused on is very different. So we need to think about whose voice is loud. Keep going.
Yep.
Okay, so commissioners, if you don't mind looking at the slide, that's a picture.
The boat.
So we just want to practice a little more. Commissioners, everyone able to read the text on there, or should we read it out loud? Sure glad the hole isn't at our end. Okay. And it is not intentional, I did not make this drawing, but it is not intentional who is in the boat. That is just, they are just people that somebody drew. So do not make meaning of the fact that they all look like white guys. That is not intentional. So what's happening in this picture, commissioners and mayor?
The boat is sinking.
Thank you, mayor. And what else is happening?
And two guys are kicked back because they're like, my name is Bennett and I'm not in it. So as long as those guys keep working, I'm not sinking, right?
Two guys are chilling in the back. What's happening at the bottom of the boat?
They're desperately bailing out the water
That's
going to sink them all.
Yep.
Who does it remind you of, commissioners and mayor? Who could be at the top and who could be at the bottom? All different kinds of groups could be at the top and the bottom, but who are some of them?
I would say people of color are the ones trying to bail out the boat.
There you go.
Because they're always trying to just survive,
That's
right?
And you could have white folks or rich folks or
Right,
whoever it is.
rich
at the
folks
top.
are kicked back, just saying, why aren't they working harder?
Yeah, there you go. Who else could it be, though? I want us to think about all of our systems. Yes?
People who are living in areas of our city that are more environmentally degraded and are having much worse health outcomes.
Got it. And people who are living in more healthy areas. Who else could it be?
Those are mayors bailing, and that's our United States Congress.
Okay, there you go. I was wondering who's going to be at the top, but I got you, Mayor. Yes, thank you. Who else? Who else could be at the top and the bottom?
Renters and landlords.
Renters and landlords.
Yeah.
Who else? I'll let you know, commissioners and mayor, that sometimes we had in a room of managers and and staff, people saying, those are the managers, and here's us down here. I also heard different departments say, there's public health and there's education, right? Two different departments. And even in one department, there's the budget office and there's the folks that are delivering service or whatever it is, right? So like even inside of our dynamics, we can see how this stuff could play out.
But what's not happening in the picture?
Not everyone is contributing to the solution.
What else is not happening?
There's
They're
not
all
a
gonna
recognition
die.
that They're all gonna sink.
That's right. And how long could that boat stay afloat?
As long as those guys' arms don't wear out. In the
And
front,
what happens if
right?
they wear out?
Systems level.
What happens if they wear out?
Or if they wear out, then they're all going down.
But you can replace them.
Right.
At a systems level.
Right.
What else is not happening?
Boat's not being rowed, it's not going anywhere.
That's right.
Nobody,
else?
nobody's coming in to help.
Nobody's coming to help.
These guys aren't asking for help.
They're not asking for anything. You know what's not happening? They're not asking the question, why is the boat sinking?
Right.
They are just doing what they do.
Right.
And what they've always done. My mom is a social worker. She has always been bailing folks out, in fact. And actually, but her clients would say she's sort of at the top of the boat. And the folks in the community are at the bottom. But they are not asking the question, why is the boat sinking? They are coming up with a solution. And let me tell you, in your departments, in your own bureaus, excuse me, not departments, in your bureaus and at the commissioner and mayoral level, there are some of you that are just doing what you've always done or what you think is your job and working your butts off. And there's others of you that are just doing what you think is your job and what you've always done, which is seeing the problem from a distance. And either way, that's a solution, FYI. Those are strategies, that kind of distance, that kind of working your butts off and sweating. And I heard you say, Mayor, my day is going to end like in 5 hours, 10 hours from now, so don't even worry about me. But what we're not doing is saying, why is the boat sinking, before we come up with a new solution. We don't know if communication will help. We don't know if they need to move some bodies to the side of the boat, level it out. The bottom of the boat could be completely taken out by a shark. Could be a tiny little hole. We could just stuff it and get going. We don't know what's happening because we haven't asked, why is the boat sinking? And so that's why root cause analysis is critical. We just wanted to give you another example of it as we move into the full methodology to remind you that better off measures and root cause analysis, this is a data point. If we look at the data in Portland for people of color, folks of color are sinking. And we are not asking enough, why are they sinking? We are just moving into action. And it is harming folks. And when certain folks of color are continuously bailing themselves out, there's only so long that can happen, because at some point those folks of color have to leave the city. And we know displacement is not in your agenda. That is not what you're here for. So we need to ask that question seriously. And inside of the departments need to ask, why is it that folks of color are not experiencing our services equitably? Why our budgets aren't equitably serving people of color? Why I'm looking at all the faces in the room.
Staff retention.
Staff retention is not serving people of color. Why? We may have analysis that our analysts do or evaluations. It's not the same thing.
Right.
We're not asking why. So let's talk about the methodology really quickly. Here we are. We finally got to it, commissioners and mayor. Do you want to do that?
So result, and these are the terms that we're going to use. You can use different terms that you want.
Nice and quick.
Result is a condition of well-being for children, adults, or families, and you already practice it. It's an all-people statement. All Portlanders are healthy. All Portlanders are well-educated. Any other one that's really critical? Do you feel all Portlanders are housed?
Nice.
Okay?
What else? Just a couple more. All Portlanders are
Employed.
safe.
Employed and safe.
Anybody in the room know
they
theirs
wanna
off
be.
the top of their head? All Portlanders are healthy.
Healthy.
We already got that.
Got it.
Cool. Thank
Okay.
you.
So we spend a lot of time with your bureau directors coming up with all people statements. The challenge for them sometimes is they wonder, well, what is your unified all people statement?
And there could be a couple elements or more than one. It could be 3. We're going to work on that tomorrow.
Yep, so that's a result. An indicator would be a measure which helps quantify the result. So what would be a measure that helps quantify whether all Portlanders are well educated, as an example? What would be
All of Portland.
all of Portland? what do you look at?
Graduation.
Graduation rate.
Good.
BA or better,
Right.
right?
What about for,
Well, high school completion
High
then,
school completion.
right?
good,
Yep, well educated.
great,
Reduction in crime.
good. That's another indicator, excellent.
Perfect.
So we come up with a set of indicators that guide us to say, what are we really focused on and why? Because when we disaggregate those numbers, we can see disparity.
Yeah.
And we will see lots of kinds of disparity. It's not that there's only one form of disparity, but we're specifically interested in racial equity, in racial disparity and ethnic disparity. So we look at it from that lens.
Before we jump to the indicator, what we typically do, in just a quickly beautiful exercise with your Department of Transportation, they had an all-people statement that all Portlanders are using public transportation, right? And so what we ask folks to do is to take a second and to pause and to say, what would it look like if all Portlanders
Could get where they wanted to go. That's actually the one.
are getting where they want to go? What would that actually look like? And before you say it's the percentage of people who are using bus or rail or whatever, people just reflected. It would be, we would see black and brown people walking. We would see Latinx people riding their bikes. We would see people smiling in parts of the city where they're not smiling, right? So you get into the space, you start with your results statement, but you actually have to embody what would it look like in Portland if all people were fill in the blank. And so that's the exercise to actually get to the result.
And the final word we use is performance measure. And when we said how much, how well, better off, those three, we call that a performance measure. So you'll hear that word, and that's what we're going to be working on for the next 2 days, and not on that word, but the process associated with thinking about their own work and how their own work adds a slice of the pie up to one of these larger visions, okay? So the next page you're going to look at says 7 questions at the top. 7 questions of population accountability. And commissioners and mayor, we are not going to go through all of these because you will now go to bed if we do because you are very tired and very busy, I'm sure. Maybe not tired, but super busy. So let me just name that. What we want you to know is it's a rigorous process to go through these questions at the population level. And you'll see some familiar friends in there from what we've been talking about. The thing Theo just talked to you about, that first question, what is the condition of well-being we want for all people? We don't just ask that because it's hokey and sort of like something we can put at the top of a thing and say, we want everybody to be happy. And if we want everybody to be happy, we're going to find a way to measure happiness that lives in the lives of people. We're going to disaggregate it by race. And then we're going to say, what's your slice of the pie? So the first question is really important. And you all struggled with it sometimes because you wanted to say, in my agency, we want everybody to use this particular thing, we want everybody to get their immunization for their kids for pre-K. But we're talking about something that's a little bit bigger than agency level. So they had to think outside the box bigger. And they came up with a lot of the same stuff. A lot of people had the same vision. And you'll see there's a set of 7 steps, but you see that 4th bullet there. That's actually what we talk about root cause analysis. That's what's the data and what's the root causes. So at that point, your department heads are actually digging into, so why is it that people are spending over 30% of their income on rent at disproportionate rates, especially for communities of color and new immigrants? Why? And they dug. And they probably argued to some extent, I'm sure, or they got hot inside of their bureaus thinking about this. We came back, we talked about it. Again, why? And why do we ask why? Because that's the location of a potential solution for that department. And again, you can see we would keep going down, and we would talk about how we're doing, who are the partners with the role to play, bullet 5, what could we do, and then finally, bullet 7, what will we do? What are the solutions? Now, you're like, but Erica, they all have racial equity, or they all have racial equity plans. We all know that racial equity is key to our work. This forces folks to embed a process that's ends to means. The key is do not pick a solution until you know the roots of the problem. And this allows them to see the systems level roots. Yes, please.
So how does this tool address racial equity? Because again, if we're not intentional, it
Right.
doesn't happen.
Well, perfect segue. So please go to the next page.
Okie doke.
Now we're going to practice with you all.
We got 15 and then 15.
Okay. So I want you all to think about some function of your work. It could either be something that you're working on, a policy that you really think is going to help folks of color, or that you want to implement and you want it to help everybody, but you know if you don't focus on folks of color, it won't help. So I want you to think about something that you're doing in the city. something that you're working on. You don't even have had to start it yet. Just an idea, or it could just be from a specific commissioner, something that you're interested in working
You
on.
want us to share it?
Yeah, please.
So next week, I've got a policy package called FAIR coming out. It's fair access and renting, and it's aimed at decreasing barriers for people that have them in accessing rental housing.
Awesome. So we're going to use a mini process to talk about how racial equity is embedded into this process. A short answer to your question is the principles that we talked about at the beginning. At each point in this process, we are checking what are the assumptions people are making. How does that root cause analysis dig down into the sort of upper levels of racism? Who are the partners we need versus who are the partners we have, and all of that good stuff. So we're about to talk about that in a second. Let's talk about fair access and renting. So let's look at the first question. Who do we want this policy to impact? Who is the client of this policy? The beneficiary, however you want to think about it.
It is all renters, but it's specifically aimed at people of color and people with disabilities.
Okay, so we want to look at all renters, but then we also want to disaggregate that, right, by people of color and people with disabilities. Okay, so if fair access and renting worked, now I want you to look at the second question. And actually, I don't think there's numbers on your
No.
thing, so I'll just ask you the questions.
But
You
we
don't
can count down the two.
Oh, no, I meant like page. No, I don't want you to do that because that's going to be hard. Okay. How would you know that people of color in Portland were better off as a result of FAIR? Let's do a poll now. I would like everybody, if you don't mind, commissioners and mayor, you don't have to participate, of course. For each one of you, I want you to think for just a minute. How would we know? Do y'all know what FAIR is? Y'all know this? Okay.
Oh,
yeah.
gosh, yes.
Okay, good. I know what it is too, so we're in good shape. How would you know that people of color in Portland were better off as a result of FAIR? So just think about it for 30 seconds, commissioners and mayor. Just for people of color right now, and then we'll do people with disabilities.
What would you see? What would you feel? What would you hear?
Okay, 10 more seconds. Yes, please. Yes, please. Thank you, Mike. Okay. So commissioners and mayor, if you don't mind, if you don't want to share, you don't have to, but how would you know? So anyone can start.
Our neighborhoods will be more diverse because more people, and specifically people of color, will have greater access to housing across the whole city.
So racially diverse specifically?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there a particular neighborhood where you would see more people of color than maybe you don't see right now?
Or would it be
Every
more that
place
they're
but
mixed?
East Portland.
Yeah, I mean, I could.
That's good because you get more
That's-
like when I think about my 15-month-old, you want this to be in like how you would actually see it. So you would literally see more
Yes.
Asian folk or black folk or brown folk walking around in every neighborhood other than East Portland.
Good. So you'd look at it by neighborhood perhaps?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Commissioner Fitz, did
Awesome.
you come up with something?
I don't have an answer because we don't have a baseline number.
Okay.
So it's
No, that's
not.
okay. But do you have a sense, if you imagine something, just get qualitative. Don't worry about the quantitative. Don't even think about what you currently can measure. I just want you to imagine it. How would you know? And you don't have to go as well, but anybody else want to imagine? What would you know? What would you see?
I would suspect that we would have greatly reduced the people of color that were arrested for being homeless. Because they
Okay?
wouldn't be on the street, so therefore they would not be arrested for
Got it.
crimes associated with being
Thank you so
poor.
much, Mike. Perfect.
Reduced fair housing claims.
Good, thank you. Percent fair housing claims. Anyone that, did you want to go, Commissioner Fitz, or you're going to pass on this one? Okay. Let's just start with these three. Anything that's, think about anything qualitative. Qualitative, I just mean that it's not something you can count in hard numbers. It's just something that somebody might feel, experience, have an opinion about. Folks of color in Portland might feel something or think something different.
Like, how do you know? It sounds like you're introducing it. You're going out on a limb to introduce something that sounds like it may be a little controversial. So how will you personally know that this was worth it? This was worth the political capital that I
In
spent?
addition to these things, personally.
In the
What will
2
you
years
say?
of your life that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope that people of color will recognize that the council sees, cares about, and is working to address disparate outcomes and discrimination. I hope that after facing a lifetime of discrimination, they might feel more empowered to access housing in places where they may not have in the past.
Yep.
Good. Any other thoughts?
Yeah.
Yes, Commissioner?
I would say that I would think that if FAIR worked as intended, there would be more suits, discrimination suits against landlords who are discriminating against people of color today.
So I have a question. Is that similar to what the mayor said about
The mayor
claims?
thought it would go down, but I think if it works, I mean,
That's
maybe we
perfect.
have
No, no,
different
no.
measurements, but for me,
Good.
it would go up because people would feel empowered. And therefore, if they were rejected, they would want to know why. And if they didn't like the answer they got,
Cool.
they would actually take the next step.
Good.
To
Excellent.
make sure that their rights were being protected.
And here's the thing. I did this tricky thing with the mayor's thing. I actually just put percentage. I didn't say up or down.
Right.
And the reason is because whether it goes up or down, what's the question we want to ask?
Is
Is it helping?
No.
Or-
Why?
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 Right.
Okay.
It's only why.
Right.
We cannot make assumptions. We don't know why it's going up or down. We actually have to ask the question, why is it going up or down? So we have to find out. It could be a good thing, to the mayor's point, that it's going down because maybe it spiked, to your point, and now it starts to go down because people actually are experiencing better housing. It could be the trust in government goes up, so it spikes. And then it starts to go down because the quality of housing and opportunity and all that. So again, we want you to imagine that the client is the POC renters. The impact could be one or more of these performance measures. These
So
are your better off. Yes?
I do have a couple more.
Yes,
then.
please. Please.
The number of people of color in rental housing and the number of people of color being successful in their rental housing and staying there.
So the success, the retention of people
Retention,
of color?
right.
So again, so it's a percentage of people of color who retain their housing, right?
Right, and again,
In
I'm
rental.
concerned that we don't know that, so we wouldn't be able to measure it, but in terms of a qualitative
Right.
Good.
report.
Remember, we said you don't have to have the perfect data. And one thing, is it Commissioner Udaly? Did I say that right? About the percentage of people of color who feel that the council cares. This is of close proximity to you. So you might see more Portlanders in this chamber saying, thank you, I've been housed. Like that literally, you may not believe it, but that literally could be a performance measure. We go to communities, and where we design these performance measures with communities, one of the biggest ones that largely African-American, low-income community, they said, Theo, prayers answered. Percent of our prayers answered. And to your point, like, well, we don't have a baseline. Trust me, we didn't have a baseline for prayers answered. But it's the performance measure that the community cares about. And even if you don't have a baseline, then you start from zero.
We may have some kind of baseline on how many people of color are technically homeless because they're living with friends and families due to barriers to housing.
That's right.
So that could be measured that way. I
Good.
also believe it's going to make our community safer because it will decrease recidivism. It will help people be successful in their lives.
Great. So I don't mean to cut anybody off, commissioners.
Yeah,
You guys are
that's fine.
so prolific
Yeah.
and wonderful, and I appreciate all of what you're giving. I want to just now name a couple of next steps that are really hard.
Okay.
So if you look, the next question is, what's the quality and quantity? And like I said, you all know those numbers are pretty easy to come by, so we're not going to practice that. But the fourth one is actually about the data and the root causes. And so this could be just as easily an example. This is about a specific policy, or is it legislative? Is that it's a policy? Okay, good. So this is about a specific thing, but it could just as easily have said percentage of staff of color who, a strategy to retain staff of color. It could just as easily have been a strategy to make sure that the budgeting process includes more voices of community CBOs from the nonprofits, whatever it is. So let's pick one and guesstimate. Don't freak out, Commissioner Fritz, please. Don't kill us. Red, yellow, or green about how it is right now for people of color. Red, yellow, or green. So when I say red, it means it's not good.
Red.
Yellow means okay. Green is it's great. And if it's green, then we actually have no problem, so we don't need to worry about that.
No, we actually agree
Okay.
that we have a problem. It's a
Okay.
red problem.
So which of the metrics do we want to say has a red?
Currently,
Which one? Yeah, currently we have racially diverse neighborhoods.
red.
Red, okay.
All of them are red.
Maybe, okay. POC are arrested for homelessness. Big
Red.
problem? Okay, red. Okay. Fair housing claims.
Red.
So
We know that?
Well, I mean, we know that fair
Yes, we do know that.
Yeah,
We do
Okay.
know that. yes.
25% of,
Okay,
Yeah.
POC feel that council cares. Now, this is for all of you, because this is actually not just about
This
this.
is red.
red.
Red?
Yeah, except for a
You
couple.
y'all can have difference of opinion about that.
I think it's red.
Okay, so we have two reds, not sure.
No, I would say it's yellow.
It's yellow, and then, Mayor? Not sure?
Not sure.
Okay, so we have an orange.
A dark orange.
And sometimes when people don't know, you all remember how hard this was. When I said to you, you don't know, then I'm going to give you a red. Because red just either means we don't have the data or it's a problem. It's also a problem if we don't have the data. So we just give ourselves a red or a 0 until we get the data.
And again, it depends on who you're asking.
That's
Because
right.
if you ask white people how people of
Yeah.
color are doing, they'll tell you they're doing just fine.
That's right. So that's why it's POC feel that council cares, not white people think council cares about POC.
But if you ask Latino Network
That's
or
right.
NEA or somebody.
And you may break it down. You may say, you may have differences in terms of community who've been served differently, okay? So you might want to not just, we don't like to just say POC, but for the purposes of expediency, we do.
Right.
But not in general, we don't do that. Okay, how about
Red.
POC feel empowered, okay? POC are retained in their rental housing currently.
I don't know.
Don't know?
I'm not sure.
Not sure? Okay, red. But that's an unsure red. And then percentage of communities that are safe. Let's break it down by communities.
I don't think that's expressed quite right. I guess just like,
Is that an index?
I'm
me-
anticipating a decrease in crime, which I described as
Good.
a safer community.
Okay, so currently crime, is it crazy here? Like, is
No,
it lots of crime?
I'm gonna say it's a
No,
yellow.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
would say a
Commissioner?
safe community is a community where you know your neighbors, right?
Okay.
Which has absolutely nothing to do with police or
Okay, so we'll do both of them
crime
then.
rates, right? If you know your neighbors, then that's a
Good.
community that's that has cohesion, right?
So we have those two different metrics. So we might just, you get the point.
Yeah.
Now, next step, everybody. Now you can see it in parenthesis, overall root causes. Let's just pick one, okay? And you all remember this process, but actually now the commission, the council and the mayor are a little bit ahead of you all, so don't be sad. You're gonna do it for all day tomorrow and all day the next
Never
day.
happens, right?
So let's pick one. And since it's your project, I'm going to ask if we can, somebody else picks one, but then you contribute again. So something that at least most of you can say, why is it the way it is currently? Which one do we want to pick? Commissioner Fritz, Mayor.
Come on, guys, I can't pick one. You gotta pick one.
Why don't you- Yeah,
Racially diverse neighborhoods.
racially diverse neighborhoods. Okay. And what about you? Which one would you pick?
Hey, that works for me.
Okay. So now, you're like, but Erica, you just made us pick colors and blah, blah, we don't have the data. No, it's okay. We don't need the precise data to know it's red. So, do we want to talk about a specific neighborhood? Or do we want to talk about neighborhoods in general?
Well, we could make sense to talk about Northeast Portland, which has gone from
Northeast Portland?
majority black to minority black in 25 years.
Okay. And so currently it's a red in Northeast Portland. Is it racially diverse there right now?
Not
Well,
even close.
What is
I
it?
would say relative to other neighborhoods in Portland, it is racially diverse except for East Portland, but there has been a mass displacement. So I think the number's around 25%.
25% what? Displacement?
No, sorry, people of color.
POC? Okay. And what was it? So let's do a trend line.
So it used to be, well, when people of color were forced to live there, it was like 65% African American.
And when was that? Around when?
And that was right after Vanport, so it
Post-World
was-
War
50s?
II.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was 65% then. What was it in about 1990? If you
So
just
in
guess.
1990, 10,000 African-American homeowners
Yep.
were pushed out of Northeast Portland.
Okay.
And let me just say, that was after the I-5 expansion, after Emmanuel Hospital's expansion. Every
Got it.
public works project
Memorial
displaced African-American homeowners or business owners.
So was there a steep decrease in 1990?
So in 1990, there were 10,000 homeowners that were African-American who were displaced from inner Northeast.
Out of how many? Do you have a sense of it?
Out of, No,
I don't know the exact number.
But it was
I
just-
just
it was
know-
It was
significant.
huge, so kind of something like that happened.
1990 was the beginning of just this mass
Slow decimation.
displacement.
So let's say,
Yeah.
we don't know exactly what happened, but it was a steep crash.
It was
and
a,
then we-
let
then we
me
got
just
to
say,
where
it was
we
a
are.
steep crash, and we did not call it a housing emergency then.
Nope.
And so now, and where might it go if we don't do anything? So here we are at 2019. What happens in 2025 if we don't do anything different?
Well, but we have done a few
Nope.
things to keep it
I
from
know-
getting worse.
I know,
but-
Commissioner,
But if we
so
did
much love to
nothing
you. You're being
different-
so kind. If we did nothing different,
If we did nothing different, I would suspect that there would be less than a 1% African-American population.
keep going down.
Because now that we've pushed them out to the edges of East Portland, the next move will be out of the city of Portland.
got it, Commissioner. So for everybody else, it's a steep decline. If you see this dotted line, all that means is if we don't do anything. And the commissioner's like, well, we are doing something. I'm like, totally got you.
No, I mean, we have done previous
stuff.
things in the last couple years
And it's
to
slowed,
mitigate.
it has it, do you know if it has changed?
It has slowed down rent increases, it has eliminated no-cause evictions. So
it slowed it down, but it didn't go up.
No.
Okay, okay, I just want to make sure that I'm not putting
Yeah.
bad data down. So it
Yeah.
slowed down, but it still is getting worse.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So now we have our data trend. And we're going to do the quickest root cause
Oh,
analysis.
good luck with that.
So why is it that currently you have black folks being pushed out of East Portland? Why?
Well,
Northeast.
okay, and this is for the council, these are the
Yes.
big dogs here, so I just want to be honest about what we're talking about. We started with POC,
Right.
someone went black.
Right?
This is something you all
Somewhere
need to
along the
wrestle
way,
with.
we were black.
It's
Okay?
the most
And there are some
significant.
cities
Yeah.
where in their results statement,
Right.
they will be explicit
Yeah.
about what we call the canary in the coal mine.
Right.
And you have great power to allow your bureau directors to be specific. POC has been clever across the country because it aggregates our Asian brothers and sisters. It's very complicated. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. So just, and
We're
note,
talking
you've
about
done it
black
here. So
community.
Erica wants to go root cause, she's going black. That's
Yeah.
not what everyone said. That's something that would
we
be
okay
very
with that?
helpful to these people if you wrestle with and landed on. And it's not to the exclusion of others.
Right.
There's tons of research that says if you go there, it will help
Everybody.
everybody. Okay? So
There
I just want to
yeah,
pause at that
thank you.
point because it is an important
Good.
strategic decision for your bureau directors to be clear about where the strategic focus is.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Theo. So we have this red, right? Red. So now why? And I know, Commissioner, you said a lot about the history already. So we have some of those root causes. The history. What happened in 1950? What was the specific thing that happened?
Well, there's a lot of urban
The
development.
flood.
Oh,
Flood.
yeah.
Okay, good.
That
What
was
else?
in
So
the
why
40s.
else are black people being? So that's one of the reasons why there are 10 minutes.
Yep.
Well, there's why there are black, but I'm not asking about that. I'm asking why currently are black people being pushed out of East Portland?
Rising rents.
What was it?
Well,
Political representation. What was it?
rising rents is the
Okay, good.
number one
Keep
reason
going.
now, but.
Rents and one more.
Property speculation.
Speculation, property.
Lower
spec-
incomes.
And lower income, good. Property, speculation, and lower income. Okay. So, we have flood, which was in the past. We have political representation, we have rent.
We got to take flood out because
Oh, yeah,
flood is
you're
what
right.
brought people
That's
to the
historic.
community.
That's right. And
Yeah.
that actually is probably down here a little, in the root a little bit. We'll
It
talk
is,
about that in a
yeah.
minute. Property, speculation, and income. Oh, I love your clarity. I really do love your clarity that you can see how you get to root. That makes a lot of sense to me because a lot of times people can't correct me, and you're completely right, which I love. It's
I'm
like
a
my favorite.
stickler for details.
I love it. Oh my
Okay, let's
God.
get back to it. We got 10 minutes.
I know. Okay, let's pick one. So where are we going to go? No, I'm serious. It's a lot of, I get great gratification. Which one are we going to pick at? Property speculation, rents are high, political representation, or income? Let's actually not, I'm not going to go to income for right now. Let's do one of the other ones.
This is hard because we're leaving out the fact that we, through racist public policy, basically engineered this crisis.
That's fine. So policies, they exist right now
Okay.
that you're going to undo. So we put policy
So
there.
you really have to put urban development on that list. You
Well, that's
can't-
part of the
That's
policy.
under policy.
That's under policy.
That's
Yeah.
under policy. Okay,
And
good. So that's one
redlining
so
policy.
do we want to pick policy or is there another one we want to pick?
And I don't know why we have, why do we have
speculation.
political representation on there?
What'd you say?
Why do we have political representation?
I don't know.
Mr.
Why? Because I added that.
Yes, that's one. We don't have to. we
I
can
think
have-
that is
yep.
absolutely one reason why black folks keep getting pushed, because they don't have political representation.
I mean, I would pick policy just because
Okay.
we
And- yeah,
planned
no,
our
we don't have to-
way.
We can have them all. The
Yeah.
cool thing about root cause analysis is that we can actually have a conversation, we would, about each one. Your departments are gonna actually have a conversation about all of them.
I'm curious.
And this happens, and I love it. It's the dynamic that's very
and I'm
healthy.
curious, do you think that that's not a cause of,
Ooh, let's pick it. I'm gonna pick it now.
displacement?
Yeah, ready?
I agree.
So, why does political representation connect to the displacement? Because I love the heat. Why does it connect to the displacement of more and more black people from East Portland? So you put there, so let's start with you. Why?
Well, because if we were the decision makers, if we were the ones with power, we certainly wouldn't be displacing ourselves from a community that we've made home,
So-
right?
so
And
I-
so the people that made the decisions about, gee, it's a great idea to give Emmanuel this plot of land and give them 7 years to develop
Got
and
it.
never take it back 32 years later and then call it a partnership with the community to undo racist practices of the past. So that's just one example.
Got it. And so why is it that black people there aren't more black people being politically represented in Portland? Why?
Well,
So there's a
because
few reasons.
Take the
Why?
bait.
well, I would say traditionally people vote for people just like they hire people, just like they live next to people who they're comfortable with.
Good. Why
and
else?
therefore,
Because it costs a boatload of money to
and
run.
they have less resources that they have
Okay,
less.
I'm
Wait,
going to do
wait,
it.
wait.
I'm going to do it.
Okay, we got the mayor and Commissioner Fritz. Costs a lot of money, Commissioner Fritz said.
It costs, let me get it.
Okay, Mayor, you're coming. Commissioner Fritz said, costs a lot of money to run.
She's
It costs money to run.
Costs of money to run, cost prohibitive.
Okay, go ahead, Mayor.
Form of government, it's a structural impediment.
No.
Okay, no. Hey, everybody, guess what?
Brainstorm.
The cool thing
No
about root
value
cause
judgments.
analysis is we can actually talk about all three. We actually don't need to choose.
Okay.
Okay, this is the cool part about it. So,
is wrong?
hold on one second. Okay, hold on
You
a
had your
second.
turn.
I have one. And
No, wait, I'm
okay.
just gonna, I know, I wanna do this with you all for so long. So let's just pick one we're gonna dig into, ready?
We got like 7.
I didn't
People
even
vote
get
for
to
people
contribute.
like them, it costs a lot to run, or the form of government. Which one
I
will
don't
we
like
dig
any of
into?
them.
Okay, that's okay. Which one are we gonna dig into though, for now?
I'll take form of government.
Form of government,
For
what would you like to
300.
vote, what would you like to dig into?
I would just say, what was the first one?
People who vote for people like them.
Sorry, I have willingly led you into just the ultimate.
The conversation no one wants to have.
Okay, I guess
Yeah.
what, I'm
3 minutes
willingly, I'm gonna take,
Willfully
for
would be
now,
better
because
said. No,
I'm gonna take them off.
Very
These ones are coming off for a minute, so
Okay.
people vote for people
Oh.
like them.
Okay, I didn't
real
get to
life-
add,
no,
and
no.
now you're taking my choice away?
Commissioner, in real life, we would truly go through all of these, and it would take us like 3 or 4 hours, but let's just pick
Okay.
one of them for now. People vote for people like them, or it costs a lot to run. Which one do we want to go in? Mayor, which one? You're the tiebreaker. Which one can we dig into?
Okay, I won't pick my own. That would
Cost
be
to
very
run or
selfish.
people-
Yeah.
Stick away.
Which one?
Wait, you took it away?
Yeah,
Oh, it's still there, later.
it's still there, but it's for later.
Okay, go for income.
Income. So people, it costs a lot to run. So why would black people be disproportionately impacted by the fact that it takes a lot of money to run?
Because they are lower income on average,
And why?
because of historic and systemic racism.
Okay, well, remember down here, we got racism.
Okay, lack of educational and economic opportunity.
Education, economic-
Generational wealth resulting from redlining.
Good. Redlining. Oh, that's together, you said. Redlining. Okay, so at this point in our root cause analysis, you can see it gets expanded again, right? We would talk about educational inequity for people of color. We would talk, or black folks, economic inequity, goes back into our discrimination, all the stuff we talked about, but other things. Wealth and redlining specifically in Portland, but also at the federal level as well, right? We would go into those. Now, if we knew, and you're like, well, we can't go back, Erica. We can't go back to 1950. And again, eventually we could get down to structural and institutional racism, for sure. But now just look at this simple diagram. I don't mean to make it, I don't want to cut anybody off. I just want to say this. What is a root cause that you can just see up here, simply, not even going down below here, that you could do something about as council? So costs a lot to run, or people vote for people like them.
See, I will fully lead you down the road here.
That's Commissioner Fritz. Which one?
Campaign financing.
Okay, so
Ding, ding,
here's the thing, right?
And 3 of us agree.
This makes it look, I just, like, you all just played so well. I really appreciate letting me push on you. The thing is, we would want to do a thorough, to your point. Why didn't you let us talk about form of government? Why don't you let us talk about income? We want to talk about those things. We want to understand what's under those things. Some of those things are technical and things that we might be able to change, we might be able to negotiate. Other things are really historic and deep. Some of them are cultural and historic. Why do white people continue to want to put white people in positions of power? Why are they more comfortable? Now, we could also do something about that. We could also educate and become culturally whatever. We could put just more people of color in power and screw it if people are comfortable. There's all kinds of things we could do.
That's for me.
But the thing about the departments that are around the table is like if they do this analysis of what's happening in their own organizations, they can actually say, commissioners and mayor, I know we have this great idea, but we did an analysis of what's actually happening. And if we work together, we could actually come up with a solution that would blow this out of the water versus us piecemeal doing it and just kind of missing it and going to that same bench of solutions. Now, this is very macro.
And imagine if this root cause analysis was done with a room full of black folk from East Portland who were displaced.
That's right.
Then you'd have some good tiebreakers amongst you.
Do it.
Because you all did great, but probably not as great as
They would.
those
That's
folks
right.
did.
But we don't want to make it simplified. It's not simple. When I do this with a major foundation, when we do this with the city of San Francisco, and we do this, we were just, again, we're going to be at Seattle Mayor in
July
a
12th.
month, and Mayor's office. We don't want to make it sound simple, because you all have complex reasons about why. We want to take our time with it, which is why we've been together for 9 months. And that doesn't stop there. The work has to continue. Your departments want this work to continue because they want to actually make a difference and have an impact. I didn't see one person in that room, department folks, that was not like totally excited and committed and totally overwhelmed by the prospect of you all not loving this, like wanting them to do this kind of work. Like they want this. They want the authorization. They want to do this work, but they know that it might not look as good at the beginning, because sometimes they're going to uncover some stuff that's just. So just to leave you with, there are more steps. The next step is like, okay, if you were serious about changing form of government or people like white people, sorry for the shorthand, then who would you have to partner with? Because the mayor and the commissioners, like you all have such authority, but there are so much rich resources in the community that you need to partner with to get this stuff done. And so the next question after partners is, what could you do? And then what will you do? So it is all the ideas are good. Community, come with your ideas. Best practice people, come with your ideas. Science academics, come with your ideas. Now we have them all there. Which idea or more address the root cause? Again, it's a match. It's a rigor. And then we propose to do this thing, okay? And then we start again in that thing. Now we do the same process again. Who's the client? How do we know they're better off? And it's this iterative process that just, to your point, you don't know where you're going to end. So that's what we say is the power of this work. We are racial equity advocates that work inside of systems, because often nobody works inside the system. They just want to work with the folks that live in community, and that's critical work. But we want to make sure that inside of systems, that people are really able to use something so rigorous to deal with racial equity.
So you've done it. Snap for yourself, we snap. Can we snap
Let's
for
snap for the commissioners and the mayor.
Here. Well done. You've done a crash course in RBA. What I will say, one of the things that the mayor mentioned, which sounds like the elephant in the room, form of government, is something that has come up a lot from your bureau chiefs. And so the volatile nature of your
We have
terms and
outstanding
transition.
leadership here.
Exactly. So if there's any way for you all, what we would typically do at the end of an RBA training is we would ask you for some reflection, and we do have 5 or so minutes for you all to give us any questions or thoughts you have. We would ask for a reflection, and we would ask you to make an action commitment. And this functions, I don't want to call it a dysfunctional system, but it plays out for them, so that racial equity changes every few years or this or that. And so I would just challenge, respectfully, the Commissioner and the Mayor to think of a way to empower these folks on a multi-year basis to actually do this work beyond your incredible leadership in light of some of the nature here. So thank you very much for the time. We really, really appreciate you indulging us. Thank you for allowing us to do that. We'll sit back if there's anything you want to ask or offer.
Well, and if I could just speak to that last point, the intent is to continue coming back to the whole council with binding city policies that empower the directors and bring them together so that the racial equity work lasts long after any of us are no longer on the council.
That's awesome. And the key is if they can co-define impact, then they can figure out what their slice of the pie is. And then if you shift, right? I know the council can sometimes, you can be commissioner over a certain set of bureaus at one point, and that might shift. The impact doesn't change. The thing that they're
Right.
aiming towards doesn't change. That sounds like if it's aligned with your vision, then that's extraordinary.
And my concern is that that goes on whether there's a city manager or a city commissioner over a particular bureau. That either way, we need to have those impacts and those that clear
That's right.
path.
And I would just say, I just can't believe you like circled that one. But let me just say that I don't think that, I think that once you unpack that and got to the root,
Yes.
you would find out that it is not, in fact, a form of government. It is how we operate within the form of government that we
Love it.
have.
Love it.
And it's like, I think that's a default position that people take because, it's a great excuse to like not do things differently. But nothing in our current design actually doesn't allow us to do things differently. So I've politely disagreed with the mayor over and over again on his premise about whether it's the form of government or it's how we operate and maneuver within this frame.
Well, I mean, but to be fair, the cost to run is directly linked to form of government. That was my thinking in supporting that item, because we are at large. Our district is the whole city. And although there are no longer any districts that are majority, minority population, I do think that if we had districts, it would be easier for African Americans and people of color to run and win if they had smaller ground to cut. And, I mean, I'm an anomaly here.
am
Commissioner
I.
Hardesty is a bit of an anomaly. Hopefully, it's the start of a.
Got it. And might I just offer that when we name something at that point, it is in the root cause analysis where some of that stuff comes out. Where are the areas at which we can make some changes, and where are the things that we feel like we can't make changes in? So it's not a matter of saying we're circling it because it is the core. We're circling it because it keeps coming up, and it keeps.
Yeah.
It's a story. It's a real story that it keeps being told and being told. So if part of the conversation is not that's the problem and it needs to be changed, but why is it perceived that way? Why is it the way it is? How is
Right.
it structured? Like sort of what's under that conversation, as well as the technical aspects. If we did a root cause analysis of that, you would find those nodes of where change and transformation are possible. And sort of sometimes the story of it is part of the problem, right?
Does part of that analysis look at what are the unintended or the
Yes.
intended or unintended consequences as
That's
well?
right, yes.
It's not just about let's fix that problem, but
No.
also let's not create a different one.
That's right. It does both. So when it's thorough, it actually does both. And sometimes the impacts that we name, like for example, for that fair housing, we are so clear about the things we want for people of color. But we might have some things that we want for white folks, or things that we need to be clear about for white folks. So again, there is always the inverse, the unintended consequence, the people who are maintaining the system or having that conversation, and the folks who we are directly desiring to make a difference for. So there's always both sides, and we encourage the departments as well as everybody else we work with to name the impact that we want to see, so that we also see the roots of the unintended consequences simultaneously and can address those unintended consequences, not just the sort of proactive component. So it's quite complex. We don't want you to think that we are trying to simplify complex systems, and yet by calling it out, we can see that we can do better at focusing on roots. And one thing,
And I'd say that question of is anyone better off would be the question I would leave you with. And we've seen it often over the last few years, and we look at the criminal justice system. Folks stop asking, was anyone better off? We were incarcerating folks at great rates. We were doing high numbers really well. People were making money. But then now, all across the country, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, people have acknowledged that, like, well, who's really better off as a result of that massive explosion of incarceration for people of color? So it's a classic example of that negative externality. And people didn't stop to say, well, who's actually better off in the aggregate?
Well, Mike Sturr of the Water Bureau has been really enthusiastic about that. He's at a conference in Denver today, otherwise he would be. I noticed
know.
Michael Jordan is here.
Yes.
Commissioner Fish wished he could have been here. He had a medical appointment. Of
course.
And I found this, I've even though it was kind of frustrating because it's just 2 hours and it's obviously, as you said, a 9-month process, it's really helpful to me to get a flavor of what the work that you're doing. And I really appreciate each of my colleagues for participating and
Thank you. Thank you for
sparking my
inviting us.
thinking.
Yeah, it's the same. My folks have been very complimentary about the work that you're doing, and now that I see it, I can see why they're excited, because you're actually getting to the root causes. It's not just another, what, program or,
it's not a
right?
program.
It's something that actually becomes ingrained in the work that's being done, so,
Commissioner.
thank you.
Well, in particular, just not focusing on the numbers. When I heard the title, I was like,
Right.
It's pretty dry.
Yeah, I know. We want to get it in the door because some people find that, wow, yeah, impact and results. And some people are like,
yeah, but you've
don't
made
know.
it clear that results are not just the numbers. They may include the numbers.
That's right.
We've always struggled to quantify community engagement.
That's right.
And yet it's still a result that we want to figure out how to measure and or at least gauge.
It's really helped me to think of this approach in similar terms to universal design. I kind of always go back to disability in my mind because that's my lived experience, but we have to design or create policy for the extremes, and we tend to
That's right.
shoot for the middle. And the extreme over here, which I'm going to say is affluent, white, able-bodied, well-off people are also very well served, and anyone who is on the other side of the middle has not been very well taken care of, and that's why a subject, I hate the word target, but like a focus person, a black woman, a low-income black woman, is going to capture most of what we need to do. I do see disability as this
right.
variable that is an extra challenge that needs to be
Absolutely.
considered. And I'm always interested in how we work that in, because, that goes across all
That's right. That's right.
boundaries.
And I
Yeah.
guess the biggest fear that I have is that white people will check out. This is not about me. Why do I care? I'll just go do my thing.
That's right.
And the moment you say we're centering blackness, people check out. Okay, see ya. Right? I'll come back when you talk about white folks, right? So how do you make sure that the folks that are, I think that's the question I asked earlier, so what's in it for white folks?
That's right. It's a really good question. Well, do you want to answer that or do you want me to answer it? So
that one.
it's true. The first piece is when you do this work in multiracial teams and you begin to use both members of that team to dig into the root causes, and you notice that some of the root causes are sort of structural and undeserved, right? There is this transition that happens in the way people are able to understand the work. If you haven't noticed, most of your department staff are white, and we have them in the room. And due to some of the work of the Office of Equity and Human Rights, as well as due to other things that they're doing simultaneously, we can't imagine that just this is sufficient. There is still that hearts and minds work that has to get done, especially for white folks. And so what we say is, in partnership with other things going on in Portland, the way that white folks are coming to understand that their humanity is at stake. If folks of color are struggling and suffering in Portland, white folks suffer too, not just because they personally, don't have
no
a job,
longer here.
but folks of color are no longer here. White people will suffer from that. They don't know it necessarily and how it impacts them. But what we also do is develop performance measures for white folks. So as we think about the capacity being built, staff of color are retained, let's say. We also want to say white folks, maybe, this is not something that I am asking you all to do, but I'm just saying, white folks who really are deeply committed to and begin to use an anti-racist lens in their work. And those could be two separate performance measures happening at the same time. And if white folks aren't moving, then we say why, and we dig. So this methodology allows us to really think about structural and institutional racism from multiple lenses. And it's not just people of color that are being focused on, but it's also white folks that can be focused on. And we just think that, like we said, we don't do the individual level work. We know plenty of brilliant people who do, including people in this room. And that work has to be invested in, as does this kind of work need to be invested in. It's a heavy lift for your departments to do this work, and yet they come to the table, they do their homework, and they ask the best questions, which tells us that if Portland is the first place in the country that gets this right, because there is no other place. There is no other place where we're sitting in front of city council except for maybe Seattle soon, so we'll see who makes it happen. We have seen people use this methodology to successfully transform population level indicators. We've seen in Chula Vista, California, third grade reading for Latinx kids got up to and then surpassed white children. And using this methodology, we've seen foundations completely transform their grant making. We're talking about big boys, like big foundations. Change their internal infrastructure and then give money out differently and actually start to see impact in community. So it's not, I'm not saying that nobody else does it, but not at the city executive level. You all would be the first. Though that's usually a collective of people that are like, well, city's not doing it, so we're gonna do it. And then they transform. But you all are really at the head of that curve right now. You really are. And maybe Seattle, we'll see. We'll see which one of you, not to trade.
New Zealand, national
Oh,
level.
boy.
Oh yeah, New Zealand does it as well.
We got a healthy competition with Seattle.
Where's
That's
that?
We're rooting for
one
you,
way to
though.
make
We're
white
rooting
people
for you.
care. Make them think they're going to win something.
Yeah, right. You can beat Seattle, yes.
All right, this is deteriorating rapidly.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Mayor.
it very
Thank
much.
you, Mayor.
Thank you, and thanks to all of our
Thank you
department
very much.
directors.
Thank you, department.
Thank you,
all.
departments.
Thank you.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Commissioners and Mayor.
You're here.